Portland, Oregon has become the epicenter of demonstrations calling for police reform and racial justice nationwide. For more than 100 days, activists have been on the streets demanding change. And while some nights were peaceful, others led to clashes between protesters and law enforcement. An article in the Washington Post highlights one of the controversial tactics used to control protesters in downtown Portland: federal agents scooping people up in the middle of the night and then releasing them without charges. Shawn Boburg, one of the investigative reporters behind the piece, joins us now from Washington to talk about this reporting. Shawn, thank you so much for being with us. Explain to us the tactics being used by federal agents in these arrests and, more importantly, the legality of them.
So it's important to make a distinction here. Everyone's seen images of clashes between law enforcement and protesters outside the federal courthouse in Portland. And in that melee, you have video cameras, people taking cell phone videos. What we're talking about in this subset that we examined are when Immigration and Border Patrol agents sent to Portland by the Trump administration ventured away from the courthouse, and they were at their most aggressive and proactive, scooping people off the streets. And what we found was that in these cases we looked at, agents were in military tactical gear, driving unmarked vans, scooping people up off the streets without identifying themselves and interrogating them, and in some cases holding them in jail cells without telling them what they were suspected of.
So the Washington Post took a closer look at sort of 4 cases. And I think that's really good that you point out, because we just ran some video that we're showing protests. But on the Washington Post website, there's video that goes with this story. And what you see is that the people who were picked up, the people that you guys focused on through surveillance video, there's no protesting going on. You know, the streets basically essentially look deserted. There's sort of trickling of people here and there, and you really get the sense that this has happened at a time and in a location where there would be few witnesses. Let's put it that way. So we've got these 4 people that you focused on. Why were they detained, and why were they ultimately released? What were the reasons given?
You know, to your point, it's really striking when you see the videos of people walking down the sidewalk, going back to their cars after a night of peaceful protest, or standing in a park and being descended upon suddenly. Part of the issue that we really focused on here is these people who we all spoke to don't know why they were detained. They were given very little information. It wasn't always evident that the officers and agents who detained them were in fact law enforcement. And it was a terrifying experience for these people. In one case, we learned after the fact through questioning DHS officials that one of the people was matched the description of someone they were looking for. But in all the cases, a person was detained, held, in one case interrogated in a van as agents drove around Portland, downtown Portland, and released without any explanation.
So what have you learned about how the Trump administration, which ordered the deployment of U.S. Marshals, border agents, and immigration officers in Portland, how are they defending this what they call a law and order approach? Polling also suggests that law and order approach isn't really working where they expect it to work in the suburbs.
So the Trump administration is telling us that under law, if their agents have probable cause to believe someone is suspected of committing a federal crime, they're entitled to interrogate them or detain them and question them. That is true as a legal matter. What you see when you drill down and examine these cases is no self-evident sense that these people were engaged in any of the violence or property damage that has been continuously cited by the Trump administration. And it's really difficult to understand what the probable cause is in these cases because the Trump administration hasn't engaged us or the people who were detained on that issue. So it's really a matter of what were the officers thinking when they detain these people. It's very difficult to know who they are, what they're thinking, and therefore it's really hard to understand legal basis for these detentions.
You guys have not been able to get any answers. The individuals involved haven't been able to get the answers that they're seeking. And the other thing that I think really comes across with the article is just how traumatizing the incident was for all of them. Oregon tried and failed to sue the Department of Homeland Security over the unmarked arrest. What did the state accuse the officers of doing, and then why was the lawsuit ultimately dropped?
Yeah, so in mid-July, the Oregon Attorney General basically went to federal court and said, asked a judge to restrain federal agents from using these sorts of tactics. The basis for that lawsuit was several viral videos that circulated on social media, and they depicted some of the very instances that we examined closely in the article. The problem was that the Attorney General didn't know the stories behind these detentions in all cases. And the judge basically decided that because the circumstances weren't clear, the context wasn't clear, that it wasn't obvious that this was a pattern. And absent that, the judge denied this request. Now, obviously, a lot has come to light since, and federal agents have also since left Portland. But the ongoing issue here is one that's bigger than just Portland. Donald Trump has said a law and order approach is needed in other cities that can't control protesters. And so this really serves as a snapshot of what he sees as the right way to handle civil unrest.
You know, I'd ask you if there's anything that can be done to hold the Trump administration accountable for these unconstitutional arrests, but given recent remarks by the Attorney General, given the unwillingness of the Republican Party to hold the president accountable for anything, not just, you know, the approach to handling a pandemic, but in this specific case, I'm guessing there really isn't. Or are the courts at all able to do something that would have any teeth?
Well, there are some mechanisms in place and to hold people accountable, and there's a question of political will, as you point out. Congress obviously has an oversight duty here, and you know, they could easily question Secretary Wolf, the head of DHS, about this operation, and of course the most fundamental recourse for people who oppose this sort of law enforcement operation is at the ballot box. And because this has become a central issue in the presidential campaign, I suggest, or I suspect that many people will have strong opinions that will factor into their decision.
All right, Shawn Boburg, really good reporting. I encourage people to head to the website and check it out. Like I said, there's an 18-minute video that goes with it, and it's really telling. Thank you so much.
Thank you.